my channel. Let's learn classical homeopathy. I am Dr. Meenu Mehndiratta. Today we will take ACONITE NAPELLUS. But before going to ACONITE, we will recall our last medicine, Abrotenum. Abrotenum is rheumatic medicine like Bryonia and Rustox, but checked diarrhea means if diarrhea is suddenly stopped, all the complaints aggravate. Second is complaints, if rheumatism is suppressed, it will go to heart disease. Number 3 is emaciation starts from below upward. Number 4 is metastasis is the main symptom. Parotid inflammation shifts to testis or mammary inflammations. Next is all the complaints are aggravated in cold weather, cold wet weather and at night. Backache mostly at night. When the patient is diarrheic, he feels better, and when constipated, he is rheumatic. ACONITE NAPELLUS. It is short acting remedy and its symptom comes suddenly and goes suddenly. Comes like a storm with violence and pass over. And all the complaints mostly after getting cold, dry exposure to cold, dry winds or less clothing, sudden changes in environment in midwinter. People of robust constitution and very strong constitution suffers violently from exposure to cold. Sudden changes in environment, remaining outside in midwinter, and they will be sick by the night. Attacks come suddenly, violently, like a storm, and it has action on all the organs: lungs, liver, chest, abdomen. But suddenness and violence is the main expression. After exposure to cold, dry winds or sudden changes or moving out in winters with least clothing, or even we get symptoms in midsummer also, but those symptoms are related to abdomen, and whereas in winter we get chest symptoms more. The suddenness of aconite is so frightful that all the inflammatory conditions are attended with great excitement of brain, violent circulation of heart and intense fear. The fear is depicted on the face. Mental symptoms of aconite are almost always associated with all the complaints. Patient feels the violence of the symptom. He feels nervous irritation and so fearful, anxious restless, and you can see the face of the patient. You can feel that how much frightful he is, because the intensity of the symptoms is so violent, so intense, that it is reflected on his face and on the body actions. The pains are so intense, the symptoms are so intense that he becomes restless, anxious, fearful, and feels as if he is dying. And he sometimes predicts that he will die today or he will die next hour. He is so sick that he predicts that he will not be alive now, that there is no use of medication and all that. So when we see the extreme anxiety, great restlessness, fear of death, as if he is dying, suddenness, violence of the symptoms, and as if he is dying, and there is no use of medicine. Extreme anxiety. You will see the face of the patient, and then only and only aconite is the remedy. Intensity marks the symptoms. If it is delirium, it is very violent, attended with great restlessness, anxiety, fear of death, and he will show all the moods. Maybe he will cry, he will throw things, screams with pain, pains of all kinds, maybe knife-like, cutting, shooting, burning, any kind of pain, but intensity is a marked condition. And he will show restlessness, anxiety, fear is depicted on his face. Dizziness prevails throughout the remedy. Kent gave an example of a woman who was shopping out and she was suddenly run out by a dog, and she was so dizzy, vertigo was so prominent that she could not get into her carriage. Vertigo that comes from sudden fear, sudden fright, as if dog barks suddenly, some accident happens, then fear remains in her mind. And if the fear of fright remains, then there is one more remedy, that is opium. Opium, if the fear of that fright remains in the mind even after months, years, then aconite for acute fear and opium for the chronic one. Headache from cold exposure, from suppressing the catarrh or coryza, going out in a wind, riding against the wind, and it's very violent with hot face, great restlessness, anxiety. Aconite acts on eyes, sudden manifestations of eyes after getting exposure to cold wind, cold air. It's violent. Tears, hot tears come out of the eyes, red eyes, swelling in eyes. Sudden onset of inflammation of eyes, so sudden that one may surprise that how such an acute inflammation can happen in such a short time. It has all the symptoms: pain, redness, swelling, burning, in a very short time after exposure to cold. Lids of eyes stick together, and if we try to open with force, hot watery discharge will fall on the cheeks. If you see pus or thick discharge in eyes with acute swelling, acute inflammation, then aconite is not a remedy. Aconite on fevers has the same cause after exposure to cold dry winds, riding in a cold wind, or least clothing. Aconite fever is acute sudden onset of fever. There is sensitivity to light, staring eyes, and pupil contracted, and there is lot of restlessness, and all the mental symptoms already we have studied. Anxiety, fear are associated with it. Aconite in no any means is indicated in blood poisoning like scarlet fever, typhoid fevers, and the fevers that take long time to develop, or the inflammations that take long time to develop, or in septicemias, or in zymosis kind of diseases, that is infectious diseases or contagious diseases. Aconite is never indicated. And some fevers have periodicity. Aconite has no periodicity, so it is never indicated in periodic fevers. Inflammation comes suddenly after exposure to cold wind, moving with least clothing, and the child has severe violent pain in the ears and wants to be carried, very fearful, fever with red face, very restless, very anxious, very fearful, and extreme nerve pain in the ear after exposure to cold. And aconite will immediately relieve. Coryza in robust people, robust children after exposure to cold. Sudden onset, violent coryza with least clothing suddenly comes and takes its course. If coryza develops several days after exposure to cold, then carbovec is the remedy. And sulfur is also that develops after several days. Carbovec gets exposure to cold even when he is properly clothed. He becomes overheated and then exposed to cold. Aconite is indicated in rosy, plethoric, robust children, not in sickly kind of babies. They will develop later on. If you have both the constitution in your home, one is strong and other is weak, expose both of them, and one will get croup at night and will need aconite, and the other will develop croup next day and he will need hypersulfur. One prominent symptom is one cheek red and other is pale. It is a symptom of so many remedies, but if you see the expression of anxiety, restlessness, heat, suddenness, violence of the symptoms, then aconite is the remedy. Neuralgic pains in the face like hot wires along the course of the nerves, on either side after extreme exposure to cold dry wind or riding in a carriage in a cold winds. The face was exposed to cold air and he feels numbness and even sometimes as if the cold needles along the course of the nerves. He cries out with extreme pain along the course of the nerves, numbness, cold water pouring along the course of the nerve. Sciatica also, numbness and cold water pains along the course of the nerves. Cries with pain, extreme pain, violent pain, and sudden violent after exposure to cold. Aconite will take care. Creeping, tingling with or without pain. It's also a wonderful remedy for toothache. And same the old story, after getting exposure to cold, pain, excruciating pain in hollow tooth or even in sound tooth after exposure to cold. There is disturbance of taste. Everything tastes bitter except water, and he has thirst for unquenchable water, a lot of water, extreme thirst. Burning is also a main feature of aconite. Aconite is very useful in inflammations of throat, sudden inflammations, swelling all over the throat, fauces, tonsils, red swelling after exposure to extreme cold, riding in a wind with least clothing,